This is not just a story. It's a battle between inheritance and identity. Her name is Madeline Hemlock, and while the world saw her as the quiet daughter of a millionaire, her father saw her as his greatest disappointment. In a small town, ruled by tradition and pride, Madeline dared to dream of change, not for rebellion, but for survival. She faced humiliation, betrayal, and heartbreak, not from strangers, but from her own blood. Yet in the face of rejection, she chose strength. In the face of silence, she found her voice. Settle in. This journey will stir your soul and remind you of the fire we carry within. If you've ever felt underestimated, abandoned, or silenced, this story is for you. Leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and tell us in the comments. From which city are you watching? We're all ears, because this memory deserves to be told.
Come closer, honey. Would you like some more chamomile tea? My hands aren't as steady as they used to be, but I still make this tea that soothes the soul. At 70, many see me as a quiet old lady, but if you knew the storms I've weathered, do you have time to listen? Memory is a funny thing, you know. I might forget where I put my glasses this morning, but those words my father said to me when I was just 20, they still sting like the first day. You were the worst thing that ever happened to us. Even now, after all these decades, I feel a pang in my chest just remembering. But it wasn't all pain. I'll tell you how that wound turned into the strength that defines me. I was born in a small town in upstate New York, on the most prosperous farm in the county. My father, Lawrence Larry Van Derlin, was known as the Corn King, respected and feared in equal measure. The cornfield stretched as far as the eye could see, perfect rows of corn stalks shimmering under the hot summer sun, looking like soldiers lined up for inspection. Our farmhouse dominated everything around it, with its white clapboard siding and dark green shutters that seemed to absorb the fire of the sunset. From a young age, I learned to walk quietly through those hallways. My mother, Carol, a woman with sad eyes and gentle hands, always tried to ease the conflict between my restless spirit and my father's rigid ways. "Maggie," she'd say when she caught me rummaging through the drawers in Dad's study, "a proper young lady doesn't meddle in men's affairs." But I simply couldn't help myself. Account books, land maps, contracts, everything fascinated me much more than embroidery or cooking. The problem was that my curiosity clashed with what my father thought a daughter should be. Every time I gave my opinion during dinner with his business partners, Larry would scowl in a way that silenced the entire table. "Women don't understand business," he'd blurt out to break the tension, while the men chuckled nervously and I felt my face burning with shame. Even so, three things kept me going in those difficult times: an endless stubbornness, the compassion I inherited from my maternal grandmother, and a thirst for knowledge that made me question everything. While other girls my age dreamed of finding a good match, I spent hours at the town library studying business administration, agronomy, and international trade. "Why waste time with those books, girl?" my father would ask me on a Sunday, right after church. "Your destiny is to marry a family man who knows how to take care of what's his." What he didn't understand was that each page, each new piece of information was a brick in the wall I was building to protect myself from his contempt. My mother always tried to mediate. At night, when the silence weighed on the house like a heavy quilt, she'd come to my room and stroke my hair. "Your father wasn't always like this," she'd tell me softly. "The financial crisis that almost took everything from him changed him. He's afraid, honey, but he'll never admit it." The family history was legendary in town. Grandfather Van Derlin betting half the farm on a poker game, the bill collectors threatening, and my father, just 16 years old, working from sunrise to sunset to rebuild everything. And he did, but his heart became as hard as stone. On the farm, the workers liked me, hidden from my father. I taught their children to read after their shifts. Donna Lou, the cook, always defended me. "That girl is smarter than any man in the Van der Linde family," she'd say, tossing flour into the air. "Too bad she was born a woman in this house." The summer I turned 20 was the beginning of everything. The cornfield shimmered under the relentless sun, and the harvest was going to be the best in a long time. Larry had invited some foreign investors to modernize the farm's production. The place was buzzing, rooms being cleaned for guests, antique furniture being polished, the kitchen preparing a feast fit for a politician. I watched it all from the window, mixing curiosity and fear. I knew those conversations could change the future of the farm, and maybe mine. I just didn't imagine that I, of all people, would have the chance to show who I was, even if it meant confronting the one I loved and feared most, my own father. One afternoon, while the sun streamed through the oak leaves in the yard, Larry called me to his study. The usual scent of leather, tobacco, and old paper. He sat at his desk, his brow furrowed over some papers. "You wanted to see me, Dad?" I asked from the doorway. "Maggie," he said without looking up, "the investors arrive in 3 days. I want you away from the negotiations. No snooping around or sticking your modern ideas in, got it?" I took a deep breath before answering. "I understand, Dad, but what?" His gaze cut through my courage. "I've been reading about some new planting methods. Maybe I could..." That's when it all went down. He stood up from his armchair, slammed both hands on the table, and said the words I'd never forget. "Enough. You've been the worst thing that's ever happened to us. A daughter who doesn't know her place, who challenges her father in front of others, who embarrasses the family with these ridiculous dreams." The silence that followed was more painful than any shouting. I left the office shaking from head to toe, my heart in pieces, but with a flame igniting inside me. I'd prove to Old Man Lawrence what Maggie was made of, even if it cost me everything. My bedroom became my sanctuary that afternoon. My father's words echoed as I stared out the window at the cornfields that stretched beyond the horizon. Each row was a silent hope glinting in the sun. I wiped away my tears and opened the notebook where I jotted down ideas about the farm. Maybe Lawrence would never see their value, but I knew their worth. 2 days later, the arrival of the foreign investors turned the rhythm of the ranch house upside down. Men in impeccable suits and women in tailored dresses paraded through the hallways, admiring the colonial architecture and the handmade details that my mother had collected with such care all her life. Among the visitors was Mark Davis, the consultant hired by my father. Tall, with a neatly trimmed mustache and a calculated smile, he moved around the house with the confidence of someone used to calling the shots. I watched him during the welcome dinner as he spoke, always in a condescending tone, about the marvels of progress he would bring to our outdated corn production. "Lawrence," he raised his glass, "with the modernization we propose, your production will increase by at least 30% in the first year alone. This land has potential. It just needs more advanced methods." "Mom, You don't have to explain," she said with a tender smile. "I want you to know that your father wasn't always like this, and even if I can't say it in front of him, I'm very proud of who you are." Her words were like rain after a long drought. For the first time in ages, I felt I wasn't so alone in this fight. The tension was increasing inside the house. The machines promised by the foreigners began to arrive, huge iron structures clashing badly with the green of the yarrow. Cornfields. My father showed off those machines with pride, a symbol of progress, while the workers looked with suspicion, fearing for their jobs. One afternoon, during a test run of a brand new combine harvester, the machine sputtered and died right in the middle of the field. The European technicians were arguing amongst themselves in some language no one could understand. Mr. Johnson, looking stressed, was trying to calm my dad down, whose face was turning beet red with anger. "You swore these machines were gonna revolutionize production," Dad bellowed, sweat beading on his forehead under the scorching Oklahoma sun. I felt something pull me towards the scene. I walked over to the machine while everyone was arguing, remembering a similar manual I'd studied at the local library. Without asking permission, I popped open the control panel and examined the circuits. It was too simple. A misadjusted pressure valve was locking everything up. "If you'll allow me," I said, trying to hide the tremble in my voice. Everyone turned to look at me, surprised. "I think I can fix it." The expression on my dad's face shifted from disbelief to embarrassment. Johnson chuckled condescendingly. "Please, Missy, this isn't some little girl's game." I ignored him and, trying to keep my hands steady, adjusted the mechanism. When the machine roared back to life, humming and vibrating perfectly, the silence that followed spoke louder than any applause. But my little victory came at a price. That night at dinner, Johnson sat next to my dad and whispered something that darkened his expression even further. I received an icy glare before the announcement. "Madeline, starting tomorrow, you're helping your mother with the Thanksgiving preparations. I don't want to see you in the fields or at meetings anymore." My mother tried to intervene. "Lawrence, she just wanted to help. She's not a little girl anymore," Dad snapped, slamming his fist on the table. "She's a woman. She should know how to act. If she keeps meddling, she'll ruin everything I've built." I cried myself to sleep that night, feeling the walls closing in on me like I was a stranger in my own home. Later, my mother tiptoed in, sat beside my pillow and stroked my hair. "Your father's afraid of losing control," she whispered. "Men, like him, think feelings are anger, when deep down it's just fear." Her comfort was sincere, but it didn't ease my suffocation. I felt like a prisoner, while the future of the farm hung by a thread. The next morning, I obeyed his orders, helping set up the Thanksgiving decorations, but my mind was plotting every detail of the fight. Ashley, my friend since we were kids, came over to help with the decorations and brought news from town. "The women are worried," she confided while we were decorating the table with fall leaves. "They say if the machines replace manual labor, a lot of families will lose their livelihood." Her warning sparked something in me. If I couldn't fight Johnson and the investors alone, maybe I could unite the other women who, like me, had a lot to lose. My mother's words comforted me, but everything got more complicated when Johnson started suspecting me. One morning, he caught me talking to Mr. Thompson near the barns, while I was explaining how the traditional harvesters pick the ripest plants. "What a surprise to find Miss Johnson here," Johnson interrupted with that phony politeness. "I understood your father preferred you stay away from the operations." His gaze shifted calculatingly from me to Thompson. The investor, a man with silver hair and kind eyes, stood beside me. "Miss Johnson was showing me the traditional harvesting methods," Thompson said. "It's a fascinating knowledge, impossible to learn only from machines." Johnson forced a fake smile and cut to the chase. "Mr. Johnson is waiting to see the new projections. If you'll excuse us, miss." The message was clear. He would be watching me closely. And in fact, the next day, I discovered that my room had been searched. My notes on the contracts were gone, along with the letters exchanged with Brittany. "We need to act fast," I insisted at our next meeting, again in the back of Ashley's store. "Johnson already suspects something and has started taking precautions." Brittany agreed, serious. "I found an important detail. The contract mentions optimized, traditional method, but the technical attachments reveal that the intention is to end all the practices of our ancestors." Our conversation was interrupted by the sudden arrival of Tiffany, daughter of one of the local investors allied with Johnson. Her appearance brought immediate distrust. "My father doesn't know I'm here," she hastened to say, seeing the suspicious looks. "I overheard their plans last night. They don't just want the Johnson farm, but all the cornfields in the region. They're going to create a monopoly and destroy the small producers." Tiffany's revelation provoked an indignant murmur among us. Should we trust her? I decided to take the risk. We needed all the help we could get. The approach of Thanksgiving coincided with the scheduled date for the formal contract signing. My father had organized a grand celebration. Investors and local officials would be present to witness the progress of the ranch. It was our last chance to act. The hardest blow came when we discovered a betrayal within our own group. I was returning from a clandestine meeting with Miller when Andrew intercepted me, his expression grim. "Sarah's been passing information to Thompson," he whispered, showing me a letter with her unmistakable handwriting. "They promised her an exclusive spot in the new resort area they want to build." The news hit me like a ton of bricks. Sarah, my childhood friend, the one who helped me organize the whole resistance, had sold out for her own gain. "Is anyone else involved?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm not sure, but Thompson scheduled a secret meeting tonight with some of the employees. He's offering them management positions in the new structure." The strategy was clear. Divide the community, buy loyalties, isolate those who opposed it. Even my father seemed more distant, suspicious, as if someone had been whispering ideas that I was plotting against him. My father nodded, visibly impressed, while I bit my tongue, trying not to point out, in front of everyone, the contradictions in the numbers that Davis presented with such assurance. Across the table, a middle-aged woman, Alice Baker, watched me attentively, as if she could read my thoughts. It was the next day that everything changed. I was walking through the cornfields early, enjoying the morning coolness before the ranch fully woke up, when I ran into Jake, my childhood friend. He had become the best horse trainer in the area. Steady hands, but full of care. He even seemed to talk to the most skittish animals. "Maggie," he greeted me, tipping his straw hat. "Up bright and early as always." His sincere smile was a relief after so many stern faces. We walked together between the rows of corn as Jake told me about his dream of opening a riding school. "Just imagine," he said, excited. "We could bring in tourists, teach the equestrian traditions of the region, region. Create jobs for the young folks. That's a great idea, Jake, I replied, caught up in his enthusiasm. But you're going to need people to support you. That's why I wanted to talk to you, he confessed, stopping beside a particularly beautiful cornstalk. I was thinking of presenting the project to your dad, but he didn't even need to finish the sentence. We both knew very well Lawrence's resistance to new ideas, especially if they came from someone with less status. I was about to offer to help when we heard voices approaching. It was Davis, accompanied by 2 foreign investors, walking through the cornfields with papers in hand. Hide, I whispered to Jake, pulling him behind some taller stalks. Something told me we needed to hear what was coming. What we heard there would change our destinies. Davis wasn't just modernizing the ranch. He had concocted a plan for the foreigners little by little to take control of the land, taking advantage of hidden clauses in old documents that my father probably had never read properly. The Lawrence family doesn't suspect a thing, Davesy said contemptuously. The old man is so obsessed with looking modern that he'll sign any paper. In 2 years, these lands will be ours, and we'll replant everything for industrial production. My blood boiled hearing that. They not only planned to take our farm, but also intended to end the traditional farming that supported so many families. We need to do something, I muttered to Jake after they left. His eyes reflected the same determination I felt. This goes far beyond my school or what you feel for your father, he said. It's about defending what belongs to everyone. We returned to the ranch house with a purpose. We knew we had a huge battle ahead of us. How to convince my father of the danger if he thought I was the worst thing that ever happened to him. I needed concrete evidence and unlikely allies. The town library became my sanctuary in the weeks that followed. Among dusty books and aged documents, I searched for any clue that could save the farm from Delgado's clutches. Andy, on the other hand, discreetly observed the conversations between the investors and my father, pretending to be just another employee while gathering precious information. Honey, you shouldn't get mixed up in these things, grumbled the librarian, seeing me rummage through the land records for the 3rd time that week. Far from discouraging me, the comment only made me more determined. Valerie and I hatched a plan that afternoon, taking advantage of the hubbub caused by the preparations for the Halloween festival. Between colorful streamers and cardboard skeletons, we whispered the names of influential women in the community. Workers' wives, business owners, artists. They all had reason to worry about the changes the newcomers were bringing. We can meet at my quilting shop, Valerie suggested, adjusting a paper sunflower on the Dia de los Muertos altar. I'll say it's a traditional quilting bee for the festival. The idea was simple and brilliant. No one would suspect a group of women quilting. This way, we could plan how to protect our heritage from the greed of Delgado and Company without drawing the men's attention. My forced confinement at home ended up being a blessing in disguise. From the window, I saw Alice Miller, that woman who had stared at me at dinner, walking alone through the gardens. Without thinking too much, I went down to talk to her. Mrs. Madeline Vasquez, she greeted me with an enigmatic smile. I was expecting you to come and talk to me. Her honesty took me by surprise. You were? I saw your expression at Delgado's presentation. You didn't believe a word, just like me. My heart skipped a beat. You work for their group, but I'm an attorney specializing in agricultural law, she explained, lowering her voice. They called me in to review the contracts, but when I saw the real intention, I knew I had to take action. It was as if St. Jude had heard my prayers. Alice not only understood the procedures better than I did, but she also had access to documents that could be our salvation. Delgado is deceiving your father, she continued. The contract hides clauses that hand over all the land to the foreigners in less than 2 years. Why are you helping me? I asked, still wary. Her eyes darkened, full of memories. My family lost everything because of a similar story. I swore I would never let it happen again. That same night, I went to the first secret meeting at Valerie's shop. 12 women of various ages greeted me with curious and suspicious looks. I didn't hide anything. I told them everything I had discovered, including thanks to Alice. And what can we do? Asked Mrs. Evelyn, whose husband had worked 40 years in the cornfields. After all, we are just women. That's exactly why they underestimate us, I replied with a smile. And that will be their mistake. During the following hours, we devised a multi-pronged plan. The women would collect stories about how traditional corn-growing techniques benefited the entire community. Alice would look for legal loopholes in the contracts, and I would try to gain the trust of the foreign technicians to discover the true capabilities of the machines. Andy showed up at the end of the meeting, bringing good news. One of the investors, Mr. Keller, seems really interested in preserving traditional methods methods. He believes that is the true value of the final product. A crack in the supposed closed block of foreigners. Maybe it was our chance. If we could convince Keller that Delgado's plans would destroy exactly what made Plainville corn special, we would have a strong ally. On the way home that night, I tiptoed down the dark hallway, but a voice surprised me. "Where have you been, Madeline?" My mother emerged from the shadows, her face only illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the huge windows. During dinner, Mr. Harrison stared at me coldly. "I've heard about certain secret meetings around town," he commented, as if it were nothing. "It seems like some people are trying to sabotage the ranch's progress." His gaze scrutinized my every reaction. I kept my face impassive, feeling the ground sinking beneath my feet. We now faced not only economic forces, but also distrust and betrayal within our ranks. With the new day, carpets of colorful autumn leaves covered the paths of the ranch for Thanksgiving. Sarah's betrayal fractured the group, but also ignited a fierce determination within me. If my father wouldn't listen to reason, I would have to act alone and risk everything. I took extra care with my outfit, a simple white dress with details, embroidered by my grandmother, and a severe black skirt. This was a solemn occasion. The contract was to be signed in the afternoon, under the guise of honoring the past with a pact for the future. Miller, now our silent ally, waited for me in the small family cemetery, where generations of Harrisons were buried. Among the tombstones, adorned with flowers and flags, he discreetly handed me an envelope. "I managed to get copies of the real plans," he whispered. "They want to turn half the ranch into a resort complex and the other half into industrial production. No tradition, no local workers, just a folksy show for tourists to see." The impact of the papers in my hands was enormous. I stored everything deep in my purse, thanking Miller with a look. "Why are you helping me?" I asked softly. He smiled melancholically. "My wife was from rural Iowa. She taught me that the real wealth here lies in traditions, not in exploiting them." He paused, "And I saw the same strength in you that I saw in her." The connection was instantaneous. It wasn't romance. It was a deeper understanding, the recognition of those who value the authentic above easy profit. We returned to the main house separately, feigning normality. The guests were already arriving. Local officials, traditional families from the area, even people from the federal government. My mother supervised the cooks, while my father greeted the visitors in the study. Andrew came to me discreetly as I arranged flowers on the tables. "The women are ready," he whispered. "Despite Sarah, most of them are on our side." I had been thinking of denouncing everything publicly during the contract signing ceremony, but now I had concrete evidence. All that was missing was one last bit of support. I fled to the kitchen where Mrs. Johnson was finishing the special celebration lunch. "I need to talk to Mom, just the two of us," I asked. Mrs. Johnson understood immediately. In a few minutes, in the small chapel of the ranch, I told my mother everything. I showed her the documents, the hidden clauses, the real plans for our land. Carol Harrison wasn't one for grand gestures. She responded calmly but firmly. "Your father is blinded by pride and old wounds. I won't repeat his mistakes." She held my hand in hers. "The Harrison family has never been the absolute owner of this land. We are only guardians." The ceremony was about to begin. Thompson had arranged everything with a notary and several witnesses, turning a sacred date into a business event. The atmosphere was festive, but I felt only nervousness. When I returned to the courtyard, I almost couldn't believe it. Dozens of women from the community, all wearing their best clothes, arrived with dignity, bringing offerings to the central altar. Wives and daughters of workers, merchants, artisans, our allies. Alice approached, elegant in a simple dress. "Everything is ready," she confirmed. "The evidence is irrefutable, and we have witnesses to speak." My dad walked in, surprised by the crowd of uninvited guests. He looked at me, and this time I saw not just suspicion, but, for the first time in ages, a glimmer of respect. Mr. Thompson approached me, his face a mix of confusion and annoyance. "What's going on, Madeline? Who authorized all these people to be here?" Before I could answer, my mom stepped in with calculated sweetness and firmness. "They're neighbors, George. On Memorial Day, are you going to stop people from honoring their ancestors?" It was an unassailable argument in our culture. My dad, torn between anger and social duty, nodded and headed into the main hall, where the out-of-towners were waiting. The signing ceremony resembled a stage play, an antique wooden desk set before the Memorial Day display. Stacks of elegant documents, silver pens. Harrison directed everything like a master of ceremonies, quietly instructing reporters and the notary. My mom gripped my arm tightly and whispered, "Now's the time." I stepped forward just as my dad Dad was about to sit at the desk. Before we proceed, I announced in a loud voice that echoed through the hall, I want to offer a prayer in memory of all the Thompsons who have farmed this land for generations. The attendees were stunned into silence. Tradition demands respect for the dead. Harrison tried to intervene, but Miller, strategically positioned beside him, held his shoulder, preventing any interruption. Our ancestors, I continued, holding up an old photo of my grandfather in the fields, entrusted us with this land not to exploit it, but to honor and care for it. My voice grew stronger. What would they say if they knew we were signing away its destruction today? A murmur swept through the hall. My dad looked visibly tense. Madeline, enough of the dramatics. This isn't drama, Dad. It's fact. I signaled Alice to come forward with the documents. Here are the real plans for the farm. It's not a respectful modernization. It's a complete industrial transformation that will destroy our traditions and take away the livelihoods of those who live here. Try. Women from the community spread through the hall, each holding a lit candle. Their serious faces formed a silent and powerful jury. George, my mom interjected, listen to what your daughter has uncovered. The federal government representative, intrigued by what he saw, asked to see the documents. Harrison tried to stop him, but it was too late. The evidence was already circulating among the key guests. This completely contradicts what was presented to us, the official said after reviewing the papers. The environmental and cultural implications of this project have not been properly assessed. My dad, pale, flipped through the evidence with trembling hands. His face shifted from disbelief to contained rage. Is this true? He asked Harrison directly. The consultant stammered, offering contradictory excuses while the investors exchanged apprehensive glances. Miller stepped forward. I can confirm these are the real plans, he declared firmly, and I am withdrawing from the project, which I consider unethical. The contained chaos that followed felt almost like a collective exorcism. Amid accusations and heated justifications, the contract signing unraveled. The investors divided, some supporting Harrison, others genuinely frightened, demanding explanations. Mr. Thompson, humiliated but still dignified, formally canceled the event. We're going to review everything before making any decisions, he announced, gathering as much composure as possible. As the guests dispersed, my dad called me into his office. I expected a scolding, but I found a visibly defeated man, staring out the window toward the fields. I wanted so badly to leave a greater legacy, he murmured without looking at me. Something that proved we Thompsons could evolve. Our legacy already exists, Dad, I replied gently. It deserves to be protected, even if it evolves in its own time. He turned slowly. You saw what I couldn't. The recognition in his voice was hesitant but genuine. Maybe you're right. Tradition has value too, but our farm needs to change to survive. We can modernize without losing who we are, I suggested. Let me show you how. The weeks following the thwarted contract transformed the farm in a new way. Initially reluctant, my dad started listening to my ideas. Together we walked through the fields early in the morning, when the dew still sparkled on the green leaves. This crop rotation model, I explained to him as we passed rows of crops in different phases, maintains production without depleting the soil. The older workers have known this for generations. Old Man Hemlock started to see the work of those who, machete in hand, chose the ripe cane with precision in a new light. His respect for the knowledge of the land grew little by little, taking the place of his old obsession with mechanization. Keller returned to the farm, no longer as an investor, but as a technical advisor. His experience, coming from artisanal production in Europe, fit perfectly with the methods of our land. Together we designed a hybrid system, preserving tradition, optimizing what was possible. The secret of your sugar, your cane juice, or your moonshine, Keller would say at meetings, is in its authenticity. The world out there is looking for products with soul and history, not industrial imitations. The women of the community, even more strengthened by our victory, founded a cooperative to create handicrafts related to sugarcane culture. My mom gave them all the support, providing spaces on the farm for workshops and exhibitions. The toughest reconciliation was with Valerie. I found her at the town market, her eyes downcast, full of shame. Your betrayal hurt a lot, I said directly, but I know you were just afraid of the future. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Madeline. It's not a matter of deserving, I replied. It's a matter of rebuilding. The cooperative needs people with experience in the embroidery of our region. Your knowledge has a place here. Her arrival was tense, but working together softened old grudges. The community learned that redemption exists as long as repentance brings real change. change. One spring afternoon, about 6 months after the failed ceremony, my dad called me to his office again. On the table, there was a document formalizing my appointment as co-director of Hemlock Farms. You saw far, farther than I could, he admitted, struggling a bit against his own pride. This legacy is now as much yours as it is mine. I looked at him, understanding the magnitude of that gesture, coming from a man of his generation and temperament. Thank you, Dad. Don't thank me, he replied, smiling wearily. You earned this place. Our respectful modernization project became a reference for other farms in the region. We bet on ecological solutions, saving water and energy without sacrificing the traditional methods that gave our product its identity. Andy expanded his riding school to include guided tours of the cane fields, receiving people from all over the United States, even foreign tourists who learned step by step everything about the cane cycle from planting to the final product. The following year's Memorial Day had a special meaning. On our family altar next to the photos of my grandparents, we placed symbols of the world of sugarcane, a small cane sprout, a gourd for tasting cane juice, crystallized passion fruit flowers. My dad, standing before the altar, held my hand, and my mom's. Our ancestors would be proud, he murmured, his voice choked. Not for keeping everything exactly the same, but for preserving what is essential while we learn to adapt to new times. I watched the flames of the candles dance over the old photographs, illuminating the faces of those who came before us. Taking care of this land, the farm would continue to face challenges, but now it would do so with the combined wisdom of tradition and innovation of the past and the future. The Hemlocks have always been guardians, never absolute owners, I replied, repeating the words I learned to value throughout our struggle. And that's how we'll continue from now on.